I'm just glancing over because I've actually got the stream playing over here. So I'm waiting for... Well, apparently we are streaming, so there must be a delay. So to everyone out there who's currently watching, firstly, excuse me and good morning. We're just waiting for confirmation that our stream is actually up. Oh,
Right,
I can
I've
hear an
got it.
echo. That must mean it's up
I've-
somewhere. Apparently we are streaming, so there must be a delay. So to everyone out there who's currently...
Right, so I've got it on Twitch, and it should be
Excuse me,
on
and
Facebook.
Good morning. We're just waiting for confirmation that our stream is actually up. Oh, I can hear an echo. That
Save.
must mean it's up somewhere.
See if it's on Rumble.
I can see that you're talking as well, so that's cool.
Excellent.
All right, looks like we are live. So,
It looks like we are live. Yes. Woo.
woo.
So
Okay,
this is just for those that so we're both streaming to our different platforms.
That
so
is true.
we're having to coordinate the
hello
all
everyone.
the stuff.
We're doing all the stuff and the things today. So,
all
I
the
think
stuff.
it's time for an official welcome. So, my name is James, and we also have Ken. I'll let you introduce yourself in a sec. So, I am representing Crowdrender. We're interested. Oh gosh, hang on a sec. Got my voice gone all croaky. We're doing all the stuff and the things today. So, official welcome. That's a bit better. So, I'm representing Crowdrender. We're really interested in distributed computing and Blender and art and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of where the place of art and science meet. And we're very interested in AI for a number of reasons. It's a new technology. It's also causing a lot of stir, thanks to a lot of hype, and a lot of things which we're going to get into later. And I'll now let Ken introduce himself. I'll just switch over to desktop only, Ken, and...
Yeah, I did. People just I'm my actual name is Ken Beyer, but people know me as Cat from Cat's Bits.
Nice.
Similar interest with AI and technology and all of that sort of stuff, but mainly from the point of view of creators' rights and related topics and subjects, but from the perspective of artists, creators, and what they need to know and learn about the AI. But my background is just education, tutorials, all of that sort of good stuff.
Excellent. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to look at, well, I want to remind us all of where we were about 20 odd years ago thinking about AI, and this was in popular culture, so I am going to try and get this up. And so you might remember The Matrix.
Yeah.
The world as it was at the end of the 20th century. It exists now.
Don't know
only
if
as
you
part
might
of a
have to
neural
fiddle with the
interactive
audio
simulation
on OBS or
that we
something.
call the Matrix.
Yeah, I will.
It should be
You've
capturing
been
it.
living in a dream world, Neo. This is the world as it exists today.
Yeah, for some reason it's not really.
Oh, the technical joys of live streaming.
Just turn your volume up, people. Yeah, I tried increasing the volume, but didn't want to.
Welcome to the desert.
So this is obviously Morpheus introducing Neo to the Matrix,
Yes.
and he's giving him the speech about the Matrix and what it is, because Neo is completely and utterly naive to the Matrix and what it actually is.
AI. You mean artificial intelligence?
Artificial
Singular
intelligence.
consciousness that spawned an entire race of machines. We don't know who struck first, us or them, but we know that it was us that scorched the sky.
That's probably a good place to leave that. I think it's really interesting because there's a lot of people not so much concerned, I suppose, about machines taking over the world, but probably more concerned about the ability for people now to create deepfakes very cheaply. And it's more about misinformation. So to give you an example, the Australian Defence Force is now looking at how they can detect misinformation that's been generated using artificial
Yes.
intelligence.
Yeah.
That's probably more of a real danger. This one is kind of like the classic, Skynet machines take over the world, which is not really a technical, credible threat at the moment, and not for the foreseeable future. So the actual real things which we should be concerned about, we're going to get into a little bit today. First of all, we're going to talk about more of the technology first and what it's useful for. But there is a very real concern about people being able to spread misinformation, and for that to become viral, because people are easily fooled, it seems, by some of these. And we're going to look at how good this technology is at the moment, because there are some interesting products out there on the market, some actually being used by companies like Netflix right now to help them make movies and make them smarter. So we'll be talking about that in a little bit. But the first thing we're going to do is actually go and look at some completely AI generated images, and just talk about what they're useful for right now. Because as creators, as people that like making art and animations, obviously there's a lot of hype around AI, and we want to first sort of delve into how easy it is to create complete productions using AI. Is it possible? And there's definitely some examples which we can look at. So this is one which I'm going to turn this one down because this one's got really loud volume. So Ken, you found this one on the net. I'm just going to loop this thing. And
yeah, it's I'm not quite sure how the oh, is that's
so everything in this is done with Midjourney and another program called Runway. So we were talking about this when we first got together and were deciding we should do a stream. And it was really interesting because it's probably the most polished technical demo, if I can call it that, that shows how you can create something that's, reasonable for a trailer, I'd say. I thought it was pretty impressive, to be honest. When I saw it, I thought, goodness me, if you were to ask me to do this in Blender, it'd take me all year.
Yeah.
Like, very technically impressive. I think, though, there are some limitations. You can definitely sort of see some issues. Like in that scene that I'll just go back a sec. There's actually someone who's walking backwards on the left. This person here. It's subtle, but you can see it. They're actually not walking the right direction because the other person is walking forwards. So there are definitely lots of little things that you may not notice them at first, though. That's the thing. And the fact that this is done with, I think, there's probably more tools than just Runway and Midjourney, but that's kind of, I think, they do the heavy lifting for you. They do all of the generation of the stills. Runway turns that into an animation. I guess after that you're left with maybe color correction, grading, and maybe some tweaking. But other than that, I'm putting the titles on, for example, because I'm not sure if AI can do titles. I think that's something you do after. Not really sure. It's also really interesting because I think we noticed as well, Ken, that it seems like this had been trained on art similar to, I think, Ian Hubert. Ian Hubert's worlds?
Yeah.
Let's just find, this was one, where is it? Like these parts here.
Mm.
So all of this kind of like very, very highly detailed technological components, they look very much like Ian's work. I mean, obviously we can't confirm that, but that's going to sort of seed our conversation for a bit later when we start talking about, well, is that okay? Like, is it okay for people's art to just be used to create something else? I mean, in a way, is that what our brains do? Like, we get inspired by art and go home and make a sketch because we've seen something that's cool and we're like, ooh, I'm excited about that. I mean, this is it's almost like taking that and making it really, really easy, because you can just feed the images that you're excited about into your model of choice, and then it spits out something different but in the style of. And I think there was a lot of protests, particularly on ArtStation, about people who are up in arms about that's a style of a recognized artist, and people are possibly going to be confused, thinking, wait a minute, did that person do that artwork? And then it turns out that no, they didn't. Okay, so that's... Yeah. What are your thoughts, Ken?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't remember this trailer being quite as detailed as this. I don't remember because the what I remember it being was you could definitely tell that it was generated by an AI because it was essentially a series of still images that were morphed or blended together. So I'm watching this thinking, have they updated the trailer?
I'm not sure. I think you're right in that it is a series of stills. Because it's not... If you look, none of the shots really have a huge amount of movement in, and they're all quite short as well. Because I'm guessing that the AI can only really fill in so much as it's moving around. Like if you wanted to have a 360-degree pan around, you'd have to generate, I guess, enough images from the AI to feed into Runway to say this is the thing I want to do. In fact, I've never used Runway, so I'm not exactly sure if you can do that. I'm just impressed with, you know, if you were going to watch it without knowing it was AI, you'd be like, okay, this is pretty good. But I guess another thing we were chatting about earlier is the limitations of it as well. You are going to be stuck with what the AI spits out. And I think this is probably one of the important things about limitations of using, you know, Midjourney and using Runway is there's a lot of stuff you can't control. At least with things like animation from Blender, you have all the control.
Yeah.
You can control any part of the scene, move anything anywhere you want, but you relinquish a lot, if not probably most, all of that control over to the AI, because the only thing you really can control is what you tell it to do. You know, like, give me an image which is science fiction, it's set on a desolate planet, it has people wearing, you know, rag-like clothing, it has robots, and then let it do its thing. If you then want to say, well, actually, no, I want to change the color, or I want to change that guy's jacket, that's incredibly difficult.
Well, that gets into the realms of, you know, the process of creating is, you know, making a thought or idea real. So, you know, you are manifesting a thought process. You know, if you go the route of text input, is that, you know, could you make the argument that that is essentially an author writing something, and in this case it's an AI revisualizing or reinterpreting those descriptions in the same way that someone might reading a book. So you get into this, I mean, this is the whole problem with AI generally, is this sort of it's not moral relativism, that's not quite, but it's a form of relativism in the sense that you know, what separates us and our creative endeavors from a machine being equally creative, air quotes for want of a better word, you know, in terms of making something, you know, because we have the ideas and the thoughts and the descriptions and, you know, the language that's then given to the computer to interpret based on whatever inputs data it's got, and then it spits that out at the other end. So, you know, the pro AI argument is that that's really no different from someone reading a book and having an image of something in their head.
It's an interesting argument, isn't it? Because it's kind of equating us to computers.
Yes.
saying, well, we're just computing machines, which
Yes.
reduces us in a way to technology, which is an interesting
Yes.
thought.
Yeah.
Maybe we
Yeah.
are maybe we're the original AI.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
there's someone
What's
who's
the
trained
difference?
us.
Yeah. What's
I
the
think
difference
that's the
between?
nub. That is the
Yeah.
issue.
It is.
What is the difference, and is it valuable? Because a lot of people who are artists, their purpose and their worth in life comes from their ability to reflect and then produce something from that reflection, or from being asked to reflect. I suppose it's still reflection, no matter whether whether you're doing it for commission or whether you're doing it purely to build portfolio or just for the love of it.
Yeah.
But then,
Well, that's.
could you
yeah,
say that
that's-
computers are reflecting?
Well, that's the argument. I mean, in the sense that we as living creatures, we have inputs and outputs,
Yeah.
nature versus nurture. So when you break it all down to its core components, we are a product of our inputs and outputs. Our outputs are influenced by our inputs and the way that those are processed in our flesh computer, our flesh CPU.
Yeah.
So mechanically, this is the thing, the mechanics, the process in principle isn't that different. It's, the AI, the pro AI
Yeah.
evangelists would argue that the only difference is well, there isn't one really. When you pare it down to its core
Yeah.
elements, there isn't a difference between how we think, function and process the world around us versus AI.
Yeah. I mean, this is a huge thing, really, because we're about to dive in not too long to deal with the main topic for this stream, which is all about rights.
Yes.
And the question is really going to come down to, should computers have the same rights as humans if there isn't that much of a difference? And I think that really gets to what you are pointing out about the pro-AI evangelists saying, well, there really isn't a difference. Like, why would they want to push that argument? Well, maybe because they need that. They need computers to have the same rights in order to get out of what we're going to talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's have a look
Potentially,
at a different one.
I've got an answer to that question, not necessarily a solution, but an answer.
We'll cover that in just a sec. So this is The Secret Invasion, starring Samuel L. Jackson, amongst others. And this is an actual production which you can go and watch on Netflix, I believe. And this entire introduction was done with, I mean, you can obviously tell it's very much in that sort of style of a dreaming, morphing, unstable representation of something. And it's just interesting how they've decided to use AI to do it. Like, is this for a challenge? Does it actually give an appealing aesthetic? Again, we've talked about quite a few things already in the stream. We're only 20 minutes in, my goodness. But usefulness is one of the main driving forces behind AI, either continuing on its meteoric trajectory of being adopted, or people eventually getting bored and wandering away. Like, is it actually going to make things better or faster? Or does it have an appeal all of itself? Do we like what AI comes up with? Do we like watching AI dream? Is it something that appeals to us? And I guess that's up to the people who are watching the stream to decide for themselves. I just think it's really interesting and cool that someone's decided to basically create an entire trailer and just let it be kind of obvious that this was generated by AI. Like, they're not trying to make it appear like it's animated or appear like it's actual film. They're not trying to fake it. It's very obvious from the outset that this is stylized, and you can.
Yeah, I
if
was
you
just
know
about
AI,
to say, do we know whether this is actually AI generated versus stylistically matching? It's the appearance. It gives the appearance of AI the way that it is stylistically. Do we know whether this is actually?
I actually don't, but
Because I can't remember whether I whether there was any info on.
I
I
think
think it was AI.
I think it was heralded as being computer generated, and it also
Right.
has a lot of the artifacts
Yes.
which kind of
Yeah.
they jibe well with that. But yes, thank you
Yeah.
for bringing up the fact checking. I did not actually do a huge amount of fact checking on this.
There's so much stuff. It's this. I mean, this is the irony of this topic, AI. It's evolving so quickly. People are creating so much stuff with
Yeah.
such rapidity that it is, it's quite tricky to keep tabs on what's going on.
Well, that's a great point. The velocity now is pretty huge
Yeah.
because the cost in time and money of creating anything now is coming down. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously we can say quantity versus quality. There's definitely going to be an argument there. I guess
Yeah.
it depends on who's wielding the tool, right? If you're
Yeah.
if you're the AI equivalent of a script kiddie just plugging away at it, you're probably not going to get a great result out of it. I mean, that's been my experience. If you just naively jump in and start asking it to create a masterpiece for you, thinking it speaks English,
Yes.
the results have been, at least with my experience for Stable Diffusion, pretty underwhelming. But quite clearly, if you've already seen on the stream that there's some people who've managed to get it to do something which actually looks really good. So it is possible. I guess the question is the time that you save from being able to generate prompts that give you a good result. How long does it take to get those prompts? The title image, by the way, for this stream took about 624 revisions of prompts, according to the author. That was their claim in court, I believe, because they said the significant
Right, yeah.
effort that's gone into making this. 624 revisions of the prompts. One
Yeah.
wonders, how long did that take? All the
Yeah.
iterations of generating the image, this time spent there. So again,
Yeah.
usefulness, like, are we exchanging one labor for another in terms of the tool? If we're just talking about the artistic return on investment of your time, is it actually better? I guess that's something we're going to find out. Let's have a
Well-
look at another tool as well. I'll just switch over to this other video. Ken, you want to jump in anytime?
No, I was just going to say that the thing that we have to consider with AI is it's a content creation tool, but for whose benefit?
Mm-hmm.
We have. So I was thinking about this earlier today. It's like mobile phones, or the camera phone basically made professional photographers redundant.
Yeah.
Computers made typewriters, authors kind of redundant
Yeah.
because you had your word processor. Photoshop made professional, traditional illustrators and painters and artists redundant. So AI. So what that so each of these steps has what they call it. It's democratized the
Yeah.
creative process. That's the word. That's the language that you'll often see or read or hear.
Which
When-
sounds nice, doesn't it? It sounds like it's for the people.
It's So phone cameras, photographers, Photoshop artists, AI. What's that replacing? What's that going to make
Yeah.
obsolete?
This is kind of the dark side, so similar to the opening video we looked at with the Matrix. Like,
Yeah.
what are the machines going to take?
Well, because the fundamental. So this. I mean, aside from the copyright stuff, the fundamental argument about AI as a creative tool is that it's so. I wrote a comment on Reddit in response to a question. Somebody wrote this paragraph of text about the AI stuff, and my comment was basically they were saying something along the lines of, AI is nothing to be worried about. And my response was, well, maybe, but not for the reasons that they'd written. The reason why AI, for us as creators, is dangerous, to use that word, is that it's not a content creation tool for us. it's a content creation tool for the likes of Google, for the likes of Bing, Microsoft, or all the big players that are funneling money into AI, because what they're doing is they're going to be the arbiters, isn't the right word, but they're going to be the arbiters of content that's displayed on the internet. So the example I gave was you do a search for a 3D model, and rather than it being a 3D model that's uploaded by a person, it will be a 3D model created by 3D AI. And of course, depending on where you're looking, you're going to get a variety of quality, a variety of different types of meshes, and you will choose from what's available because it's free.
Yeah.
So they win because they've got your attention from you downloading the model, so you're now using their content, but they've also got you because you're on a page that they own and they monetize that content. So no matter what we do as individual content creators, it's not the right word, but we are losing, for want of a better word. We are losing because the AI is not for us to monetize, it's for them to monetize us. So it's all about generating revenue. It's all about controlling. Which fits in with your point right at the very beginning when you mentioned misinformation. That's the political aspect of it. From the point of view of the commercial aspect, it's just a tool, essentially, to generate content iteratively that people have absolutely no control over, but they will use it. Another example is, so we've been showing the Matrix.
Yeah.
So, who's the guy? Who's the actor that plays Shaft? Forgotten his name. I was just watching that movie earlier, but he made a joke in the movie about constantly being confused with Lawrence Fishburne. So Google, so Google has Google TV, doesn't it? Google Play, where you can watch movies.
Yeah.
So in a couple of years, mark my words, Google, Amazon, Netflix, all the big players will have AI generation tools that will allow you to put to replace Lawrence Fishburne in the movie with the actor that's constantly being confused for Lawrence Fishburne.
You can have the movie the way you want it as a consumer.
And you can have the movie exactly. You can have the movie exactly the way you want. Maybe you don't want Keanu Reeves as Neo. Maybe you want Jack Sparrow. What's his name?
Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp. Maybe you want Johnny Depp as Neo.
That would be an
AI,
interesting replacement.
The AI will literally just say, hold on whilst we are processing your selection, and it's already got the reference material. So essentially, it's not generating something from scratch. It's just
actor replacement, which is exactly what we're looking at right here.
Yeah,
for example. So
yes, it's not green screening. What do they call it?
I think it's like either facial replacement or. That's pretty much what I've heard it.
Yeah.
So this technology is really interesting because we've talked about some of the dark sides of AI. This is actually one that, if you have access to tools like this as an artist, can save you a lot of time. So the idea here is we have this film, and this film has been shot. I believe it was actually originally shot in. It was either shot in English or German, and they swapped it around. So what these guys are doing is they're basically, you can see them here, filming actors redoing the voice or the dialogue for the movie. And then what they do is they actually replace the actors' mouth parts with a generated version of their own lips, reading the script in the other language that they need for the film to be distributed in. So this gets rid of things like subtitles. It gets rid of things like dubbing. And for all of you who like
Yeah.
old kung fu movies which are dubbed, sorry. This is the superior version. I always like that. You know, it was always fun to sort of watch them trying to sort of match.
That's what. Yeah, that is. Yeah, for us, that is what those films are.
Yeah, pretty much is. It's part of the aesthetic that we enjoy.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to find a part of the. So you can see here we've got plenty of people. Actually, I think it was one of these scenes. It was this scene here. So there is facial replacement. There you go. You can see them doing the before and after. So I'll leave it up to you to figure out which is the actual actor and which is, I think it might be the second one. But the thing is, if you weren't looking for it, you probably would not recognize that. So they've had this part of their, I'll actually pause it so we can see. You wouldn't recognize that they've actually had this part of the face digitally altered so that they can speak a different language. And now the film can be distributed. So this technology and this company which does this is actually based here in Sydney, or at least they were when I was last talking to them. And they are now working with Netflix to translate films into other languages so people can enjoy the film as if it was actually shot in their language. And all they need is to get an actor into a booth like this to read the script. So you don't really even need the same actor, I believe. You just need someone who can speak the language. So you would get an actor, for example, from France to do the French part, or from Italy to do the Italian part, and so on and so forth. And there really is no limit to that. This is where I think this is a really poignant example of how AI can be used to do something cool and good. There is no sort of nefarious thing here. The models are trained purely to change the actors. It's not to impersonate them.
Yeah, well, that's. I mean, there's that kind of stuff has been done for quite a while, obviously, because of the CGI movies where, you know, they are. I mean, granted, it's body tracking, but they're still using AI to do all the grunt work, essentially.
Exactly.
There was something. There was something the other day that I saw on Twitter where. I think it was a media company. They were having a lot of trouble hiring female influencers because they were very finicky, for want of a better word, and it was costing them a lot of money because people would just constantly, you know, drop out of the contracts, or, you know, timing issues, not show up, or all of that sort of stuff. So they just turned to generating the characters that they needed for their, you know, programs or whatever it was that they were doing, and
Which is
that's
crazy.
what they were doing.
It's crazy. It makes you wonder, like, how much depth do influencers actually have if it's possible to replace them with something generated by a computer? Or maybe it's just at what level are we engaging with them?
Yes,
If we were not able to tell the difference, it's obviously quite shallow.
yes.
How much attention are we paying to influencers? What kind of attention are we paying to them? If
Well,
we're not
that
going to
again
be
is,
fussed.
well, you see, that's the other. I mean, granted, we're talking about AI here, but the whole argument can be shifted to influencers, because it's not the influencers that are influencing the viewer, it's what the corporation is pushing through the influencers. So in terms of you know, a sort of a narrative, if you like, what's the narrative that's being pushed by AI? You know, it's the same narrative. I mean, it's not the same narrative. It's the same narrative argument in the sense of, what is it about influencers? Why are they so influential? Well, they're not really. They're only the way that they are because in the background, platform holders are earning bank by pushing these individuals out in front of people.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, there are human beings with regards to the influencers, and they are, air quotes, content creators, but their job is explicitly influence. That's why they call themselves influencers. But what are the influences? What are the messages that they are sending out? Who is directing that? Why is one influencer more popular than another influencer You know, they may have the same exact subscriber accounts, number of subscribers, but why is one more influential than the other? Is that purely organic, or is that artificially constructed in the background by the AI that the corporation runs? Because that's the thing. I mean, we're talking about overt examples of AI,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of film, but we've been living with AI for the past 10, 15 years because of how search engines work. Search engines are essentially the evolution of AI. You know, it's the constant refrain with Google is obviously the one that everybody talks about because it's got something like 90% of the search market.
Yeah.
But what you are fed, what you are shown, is curated. They don't use the word censored, they use the word curated, air quotes, to show you what they think you should be seeing. It's not what you want to see, it's what they think you, and that is all fed through an AI system based on your inputs and your actions as you use their services. And AI generated content, this is back to the content creation tool discussion. It's not really a content creation tool for us. It's a content creation tool for the corporations, the people that own the AI, to own us, what we do, what we see, what we communicate to one another. Because, you know, AI is now framing our discussions in terms of what it is that we talk about, and that's, you know, that's just Google. That's just Google search, not this more overt, you know, visual content. And it's so this whole discussion about AI is much more complicated and deep than I think people seem to appreciate, because they're fixated on, you know, how it affects them as an individual, as an artist,
Yeah.
and their ability to earn. But that's not really what the discussion about AI actually is. It's much deeper than that.
Yeah, and to follow on that, let's actually get more deeper into the weeds, into the rights part, because we did actually advertise this stream as being about rights. So hopefully we've given
Yes.
a good primer as to what is AI, is it useful? We actually touched earlier on the idea of, is there a difference between human creativity and machine creativity? Because there are some who want to have those rights. We're going to talk about that in a moment. In terms of copyright, there is a case which Ken is going to introduce a little bit later about, can you actually copyright your artwork? And other people have asked this question as well pre-stream, so we're going to get to that in a moment. But this is an interesting case. I'm going to try and play this, so hopefully the volume is going to work this time, because I think the Matrix was a little bit too quiet. But this is Laura Horowitz, who is a narrator, a professional narrator. She narrates audiobooks, and she found out that something quite unsavory was happening to the content she had created. Let's hear from her.
So I just found out that Spotify has been selling the rights to my voice to Apple Books directly for their use for machine learning and AI narration, without my consent and without compensating me. So a little over a year ago, Spotify bought a company called Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices is the #1 competitor to the Amazon when it comes to independent author distribution options. Now that Spotify owns it, they have a subsection in their contract, in their author distribution contract, not mine. I have no rights in this whatsoever to my own voice. They have forced it upon my authors in a small, very fine print subsection that you are giving away your rights to the audiobook because you have bought and paid for the rights to the audiobook, the intellectual property of the audiobook. They are turning a profit off of you and then turning around and selling your intellectual property to Apple Books without giving you any payment either. So we need to stop them. The only way to do this, there is no chance to opt out in the contract. You are automatically opted in. The subsection to a subsection, section 11, lists how to do that. You have to send them an email. Support@findawayvoices.com and revoke their rights to sell your intellectual property to any chooser, any bidder, the highest bidder. Apple Books is the highest bidder right now, but you need to make sure that they aren't selling your rights, my voice, and your intellectual property. And so send them an email today, revoke the rights. I will put up a sample letter, maybe on my website, so follow me there. But we need to stop this, because if they're coming after my art form, which is narration, you can bet if they turn a penny, they will be coming after yours next.
Really, really interesting. I think if there was a class action against this, they'd probably nickname it the Ursula class action. Or if there was an act.
Can you summarize that for me? Because I couldn't hear the audio.
Oh, really? Okay.
Don't worry about it though, because if you're recording this, so when you upload your version of it, the audio will come through. But can you just summarize it for me?
Sure. So Laura is in the business of narrating audiobooks, and she found out that Apple Books had bought the company which had bought the rights to the audiobook copyright, and then they were using her voice to train AI to narrate audiobooks without paying or getting her consent. So Laura here is kind of losing out, and you can tell obviously she's pretty upset about it, because there is now a competitor to her which has actually got a bit of her voice to it. So you can imagine how that makes any artist feel when they've had their work taken by a company as big as Apple or Spotify, because they're both kind of involved, according to what Laura said. And that AI can now narrate books to anybody, anywhere on the planet, never sleeps, doesn't need to eat, doesn't need to pay rent. So there's obviously a huge, I think, moral issue here for doing this. Because if you're going to create something that can narrate, and this has already been done. We already have computers that can read material. They use it a number of very, very good ways. For example, Stephen Hawking had a voice generator because he was unable to speak, and we all know his voice. It's on, that computer-generated tone is synonymous with him. And that's obviously, I would say, a very morally upstanding use to give someone a voice who doesn't have one. This is the opposite, which is why I'm thinking it's kind of like Ursula, that story of the sea witch who steals Ariel's voice for use in her own nefarious affairs. It is pretty much exactly that. We have a corporation that's decided to take the voices of other people and use that to create a better computer voice for narrating books. Exactly what this person does for a living. So this is probably, I think, the most well-defined example of how AI can be used technically legally, but I think morally wrong, because it's literally stealing from people, if you think about it. This person was not compensated or did not have anyone get their consent for her to participate in training something that potentially is taking business away from her. Potentially. I don't know exactly how audiobooks works. But you think about what audiobooks would have to do if this technology didn't exist. They would probably have to hire someone like Laura to narrate the book, and then they would use the recording. It seems that now that isn't the case anymore. So again, the question I guess we're going to get into in a moment is, what rights do you have? Because if we look at, let's just say, if I'm going to go and find it now.
Is she, so she's suing, who is she suing? Or
I
is
don't
she
think
suing?
she is suing anybody. I think she is telling people how to prevent it. So instead of, how do I put this? Instead of her taking legal action, she's, I think, spreading the word about how you can actually revoke the rights, because the way
Yes.
that the rights are given up is actually in a contract, in a very small subsection of a contract that the person who is creating or producing the book has. So you go into a contract with a distributor, for example, or you go into a
Yes.
contract with the person that goes and finds the narrator. There are contracts there, and they have these clauses where if you don't specifically say, no, I don't want this, I don't want the audiobook content being used to train AI. If you don't do that, then you're automatically opted in. And I think this comes under some kind of like, that would be considered, I think, perhaps close to being, we have a concept in Australian law about unfair contracts. And I think most other jurisdictions now as well have that, where if there's an imbalance of power, think about mobile contracts for people. They're usually 10 miles long, full of legalese, and no one reads them because I just want the mobile phone. Like, I'm not a lawyer. They give you a phone book size contract, and it has all of these terms in it, and you think, why? Why is there all of this protection for the mobile company? What else is in there? If you've ever read one, there were terms in there which were considered unfair, like who can terminate and when. Termination clauses were usually a big problem, and this is probably a similar thing to that. You know, we need a termination clause that's up front, saying, actually, you should not be opting people into this. It should be default opted out, and if you want to participate, opted in. But then that kind of cuts off the artificial intelligence training at its heels, because we know through choice psychology and choice architecture, if everyone's opted out, they have to put in effort to opt in. And who would put in effort to undermine their own business?
Yes, well, yeah. So, ironically, you've touched there on the whole. How should I put this? People don't read contracts. You know, this.
And you
the
should.
whole,
you really should. If
you
you're
really should.
Watching this, the one thing you get away from this stream is you should definitely read your contracts.
Well, it's not just contracts, as in, you know, you are contracted to do something, but terms of service agreements on social media. The reason why, so I'm going to be very blunt here, the reason why we're in this mess is because people never read the terms of, you know, the TOS, the agreements that they make when they join up to social media. So, you know, of course, these companies come along and use the data, the information that people upload voluntarily to these services. And from an artist's perspective, you know, they're uploading 4K images. Why on earth would you upload a 4K image to Twitter? Let's just use Twitter as the, you know, that's not your portfolio. You have absolutely no control over what happens to that image once you upload it, because in their terms of service, you give them the explicit, non-exclusive, royalty-free, worldwide, blah-de-blah-de-blah. You're essentially signing your rights away to that image. Once it's on their service, as long as you are using that service, and even then there are arguments to say that they won't remove stuff. Because, you know, if you close your account, who's to say that they're still, you know, filtering and pilfering that content?
Well, it's
but the
useful
reason
to them,
why
isn't
this,
it? The content is
well,
what
exactly.
makes them. I mean, my wife has just got she did a post about how to stop things from sticking to baking tins, because she's a chef and she does a lot of baking. So she came up with this method of making a home remedy that is called a cake release. So you put it on the tin, you bake, and then the product pops out without getting stuck. And it means you don't have to buy anything from the shops other than flour and vegetable oil. Yeah. So she posted that, and next thing you know, it's at 120,000 views.
Wow, yeah.
And we're like, that's interesting. It's just flour and shortening and vegetable oil, but it's something that's touched a nerve. You know, people are like, that's what I want. I don't want to keep buying baking paper and other stuff. Yeah. I already buy flour and vegetable oil and shortening because that's what I use in my baking. You're telling me I can use exactly the same ingredients and get rid of the baking paper? Absolutely. Yeah. So we solved a problem. Well, she solved a problem. And of course, you know, Meta, not Microsoft, doesn't want that to go away. So if she did delete her account, you know, that's still going to be there drawing attention to the platform, because they've figured out that people are looking for those kinds of solutions. Interestingly, we just came from a person who, as far as we know, hasn't elected or hasn't publicly elected to sue Apple Books or Spotify or Findaway Voices, which are the three companies that were involved in that. These people have. So the Authors Guild has accused some company, ChatGPT, so that's OpenAI, I'm guessing. Yep, OpenAI. Because it claims that material which is not in the public domain. So public domain, by the way, is anything which there's no rights attached to it anymore, because copyright doesn't last forever.
Yeah.
Depending on what jurisdiction you're in, copyrights last, I think, 70 years past the death of the author. And then that's it.
70 years plus.
Yeah, it's public domain. Anyone can use that content after that point in time. Also, you have to buy the book to get the content, obviously. You're not going to, unless someone has done the dodgy on you and photocopied and object character recognitioned and uploaded the full text body to the internet somewhere, because people sometimes do that.
Yeah.
No one should be able to get hold of that. It should be that you have to buy the book to get it. Now, maybe OpenAI did go and buy a whole bunch of books. And I think this is the nub of the issue is, well, the claims here are that you can now prompt ChatGPT to get details about the books that are not in the public domain. Details about characters or plot lines. Maybe not reproducing the exact text of the book, but giving you the same effect. You learn about the story. And this is going to be an interesting one, because they have not won, I don't think. They are starting this process, because what's the date on this? It doesn't actually say. I'm really annoyed with newspapers that don't put the dates on things.
There it is, September 20th, yeah.
Okay, we'll let you off New York Times. You're one of the good ones. So we've got, people like John Grisham, pretty famous author, and, the rest of them who are joining this battle, because they're claiming something called derivative works. So if you know anything about copyright, that's when you make something on top of something else or using something else, and it's obvious that you've done that.
Yeah.
That would be like me going to the Louvre and taking a picture of the Mona Lisa and then saying, this is my artwork. It's a photograph I took of the Mona Lisa. Most of...
that's yeah.
Most of the work it hasn't been done by me. I just took a picture.
So your argument there, if you were a bad person, you would use the transformative copyright argument, because you've transformed one medium into another. Exactly. So that's how they would get around that. But yeah, the derivative argument would be, was it Marcel Duchamp who painted the mustache on Mona Lisa? Who did that? I can't remember. But that is that would be derivative, because you're taking the original but you're changing it slightly to change either its meaning or its intent, or
he was. I think that the issue comes down to this, which is there is the intent there.
Yes.
And the intent is obviously I'm obviously not forging something. I'm not merely plagiarizing. I have a point of view which is different to the original author.
Yes, those are defense arguments rather than... Yeah,
and he may have been like, look at the Mona Lisa with a moustache on it. Are you still as enamored by it now? Can you not just see it the way I see it? It's just a person.
Yeah.
I think that might have been close to maybe what his intent was. Maybe he was annoyed.
Probably.
He's just like, can you all stop talking about this dumb painting? Like, look how ridiculous it looks.
Yeah. Which I think that was why. I think that was actually the intent of painting the mustache on the Mona Lisa. I don't know if it was him that did it, but I know that obviously there's the picture of the mustachioed Mona Lisa.
It's interesting some of the statements they're making as well, like the success and profitability of OpenAI are predicted on mass copyright infringement without a word of permission from or a nickel of compensation for copyright
that's the
owners.
big one that's the big one that a lot of people have. A big problem or the big issue that people have with AI is that Bing search does it to a limited degree, in the sense of it kind of, when you do a search for something or when you use Bing's AI, it'll spit back something that's kind of formatted like Wikipedia. So it'll make a statement, and then there'll be a footnote reference, and that footnote reference will then link down below to a link that goes somewhere. But this, where OpenAI is essentially just hoovering up, it's essentially an extension of website scraping. People
that's probably how they've
scrape
actually done
websites.
It too.
Yeah. And that's essentially what this is. It's just scraping content and spitting it out, or doing whatever it is that they're doing. but there's no reference to what they've actually done in terms of, the Wikipedia style of, we took this bit from here, this bit from here, and this bit from here. It's like if you go into Chat GPT now and ask it a question, it'll give you an answer, but it won't state any references for where it comes up with that answer. And more often than not, it's kind of Wikipediaized anyway, so that's probably where it's getting half of its information from, or from content that is
I find this
skewed
interesting,
that way.
This is part of the complaint. Derivative works,
Yes.
yes, but that can mimic and summarize the author's books.
Yeah. So now, what this is actually getting into. So this isn't a copyright. Well, it is a copyright issue, obviously, but it's not just a copyright issue. In the same way that the voiceover, the audiobook author, what's now happening here is that when OpenAI, or when these AIs do this, what they're doing is stealing identities. They're mimicking, recreating, repurposing, retooling someone's identity with the visual
That's
stuff.
super interesting. It
With
is
the
kind
visual
of like,
stuff.
yeah.
Well, with the visual stuff, it's obviously stealing or misappropriating artists' visual identities. With the voiceover girl, it's stealing her audio, her vocal identity, in the same way that it would do if she were a musician. And what it's doing here with these authors is it's stealing or misappropriating the authors' identities, because obviously John Grisham has a very particular way of writing his books that if you were a fan of his, you would recognize the style. You might not if you weren't that familiar with his books. But this is what's going on here. It's a form of identity theft, I suppose, for want of a better way of putting it. Shorthand is that this is identity theft. It's repurposing, retooling, which again spins us all the way back to the beginning. And the comment you made at the beginning about, damn it, that thought's just gone straight out of my head because I was thinking
Sorry,
too
it'll come
far
back.
ahead.
I was just going to say I'd go a bit further, because I was reminded again of that scene from The Little Mermaid where Ursula steals Ariel's voice. I know that in some cultures your voice is considered to be your soul, because it's the one way that we actually are linked together. That's how you can tell. I mean, even the Turing test, right? It's a series of statements.
Yes.
We're checking to see, is this thing, does this thing have a soul? And we do that by talking. And it's really, I think, this is, everything you've talked about is some aspect of that. It's people's essence. It's how we recognize one person from another, one person's work from another, one person's voice, especially. Their voice is probably the most closest thing to the soul, because that's, all the poetry, all of the religion kind of thinks that, if you talk about ancient books like the Bible, pretty much the Spirit of God is always breath. It's voice.
Yes, voice. The
voice,
word was
breath,
spoken.
that thing, the spoken word is considered to be, the very essence and soul of a person.
Yes.
And all of these other things are kind of other reflections of that, like someone's artwork, it's a product of them, it's a product of, their being. So I get, like, this is probably like the most touchy issue that we've ever had to deal with in humanity, when we're potentially creating something that can mimic that so closely that people can't tell the difference. They're getting confused. And one of the interesting things to do with law and rights is we have protection for brands. If you have a brand and someone else gets so close to it that a consumer can't tell the difference, that's covered by common law passing off. So you're not allowed to pass off your products to someone else. That original person can take you to court and saying, you're making a product which looks and is marketed so similar to mine that consumers are thinking it's mine, and I want to stop you. And I can do that. At court will recognize a suit for passing off. We also have statute as well, which is misleading and deceptive conduct. And part of that comes around misleading consumers to think that, you are another brand. So there's actually law that we've been building over the centuries to stop this kind of thing happening. But I don't think that law has ever predicted that we could
So
do it
here's
at
a-
such massive scales. So
here's
this
a
is where
brain
we're getting to
twister
the
for you.
rights stuff.
Yeah, here's a brain twister for you. So, yeah. So the writers' strike in Hollywood.
Is that SAG-AFTRA, or is that different?
SAG, I don't know. It's one
SAG
of
was
those.
the Stage Actors Guild. That's we'll
Yeah.
look at that in a sec. That was Stephen Fry, so they participated in a strike
Yeah.
because
so
of all of the stuff that was going on with actors being scanned, for example, so that they could be
Yeah.
used again.
No, that's what I was getting to. So when so we were talking about replacing Keanu Reeves with Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp.
Earlier. And it's why would you do that? Well, it's because it's Johnny Depp. Johnny
Yes.
Depp.
We want to
has
see
a
him defeat
look.
the agents on one bottle, not even with one bottle of rum. Defeat all those agents, not even one drop of rum. Dodged all those bullets, not even a sip.
Yeah. So
I'd see that actually. That would be hilarious.
I know. Don't give me the ideas. Actors and performers, whether they're musicians, whether they're stage actors, film actors, they all have their brand is not just their sound, their voices. It's also their appearance.
Yeah,
That
that's true.
is so. Johnny Depp isn't a private individual. He's a brand.
Yes.
So, actors, they already have those kinds of protections in place, which obviously is what, Stephen Fry was going on about. But it's interesting that the unions aren't hammering this because it's going to make actors the entirety of the thespians. It will just destroy what they do unless they protect their rights more aggressively. And this is one of the things that the unions should be doing, is going after or protecting the artists' brands in terms of their appearance. I mean, I think there's already been quite a few cases of this in the past where, as you were pointing out, where people have misappropriated an actor's brand and misused it, and they've been sued from that perspective. But with the AI stuff, we're now stepping into interesting realms. I mean,
well, that's an interesting thought. I could potentially create an advert where Johnny Depp endorses my company.
yes. Well, we've already had it with Superman. Was it the Christopher Reeve one? I can't remember. Where Superman's father was a famous actor that was essentially generated, albeit I think this was actually, at the time, it was 3D rather than AI, so it was a 3D generated actor.
Yeah.
But we are getting to that point where actors can be replaced completely, and the problem that they face, and this is one of the problems that artists face generally, is that the individual Johnny Depp doesn't necessarily own Johnny Depp the brand. The studio does.
That's a very interesting point. So
and it's the same
owns-
with musicians.
who
Same with
owns
musicians.
you?
I mean, you think of the Beatles.
Yeah, they were owned by a record label.
Yeah. And what was it? It was Michael Jackson bought out half of it, and then the other half went to can't remember his name now. The one of the remaining Beatles.
Well, that would either been was Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney, yeah. So
that's-
Paul
I think he's the
McCartney,
only
he bought
surviving
the other
one.
half. Yeah, but because I think they bought it from EMI. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I mean, Prince is another example. He died essentially battling the studios over ownership of his music because that was his brand.
Yeah.
And you know, if as soon as you sign away, I mean, again, this is why you've got to read your contracts. You've got to make sure that you are defending your rights to your content, because as soon as you sign that dotted line and you sign away your right to your content, you're buggered, basically, for want of a better word.
Well, because you've agreed to it mainly.
You've agreed to it.
I think that was the other
to-
case with Laura, who we saw earlier, because it wasn't her that agreed to it. She'd agreed to do the recording on behalf of someone that owned the rights to the audiobook, and the person who was in charge of that content or owned that content obviously wasn't really thinking or reading too deeply, which is a bit concerning for someone that deals in that kind of intellectual property.
Yes.
And signed away, you know, when obviously they want to distribute the audiobook via Apple Books and via Spotify, right? Because that's how they make money. It's a big distribution channel, but didn't actually opt out of that clause which said, well, I'm also giving you the rights to use the audio recording in any way that you see fit, including for training, in order to be on your platform and make money. And I think that's exactly the point, that if you are a content creator now and you're dealing with large platforms that potentially offer an attractive reach, you know, you can reach many people and you can distribute your content and make money through them, you need to really understand exactly what they're doing. ArtStation had a massive protest, I think in part because there were a lot of accounts showing up throwing up AI generated content, and the no AI protest was mainly about that. But then in the background, I think there may have been another issue of, was ArtStation allowing people to train on artwork that had been posted for real? And I think there was, because there's now an opt-out function on ArtStation to say, actually, I don't want my artwork trained. In fact, you know, if anyone wanted to take out AI, they'd have a bit of a job, because they'd have to convince us all to stop putting information into computers altogether. If we did that, the AI, well, a lot of things would stop working. But AI basically thrives off the fact that there's trillions of images out there, which we've all very dutifully alt tagged for them. So they have an image, and then they have the description of the image, and that's exactly what they need to train a model. The model looks at the words that are in the alt tag and the image and goes, okay, so this image contains those components. And it mixes those two together in its training model. And then when you type in exactly, or some words approximating what's in those alt tags, you're more likely to get stuff that it looks like that. And this goes down even to style, you know, a particular author. Because it's not just the alt tag that will be scraped, it'll also be things like the author's, you know, pseudonym, avatar name, or whatever it is. So let's just say if Banksy had an account on ArtStation and he was producing tons of digital art, if you then trained a model on all of his portfolio and then you typed in, I want a street art scene done in the style of Banksy, part of what would trigger the AI to use more of the images that came from Banksy would be the fact that you've got that word in there, you've got the word of the artist in there. So whenever we're making content and we want, I think this is the pernicious thing, as artists, you want to get your content out there so you can build a following. But AI and these big platforms are the middlemen. In fact, I think there was a Kurzgesagt video probably about 5 or maybe 10 years ago, I don't know, that actually said quite prodigiously back then, there are companies out there that are using graphic artists to basically replace them. You know, all of the work that they get through their platform is then used to kind of train something that can do something similar. They didn't mention which company it was, so again, take it with a grain of salt. But that was a long time ago. Now here we are, and we're facing exactly that situation where we are giving up our rights. And again, we want this stream mostly to be about your rights, so we will get to a few questions in a moment that have been put to us by people that registered for the stream. If that was you and you're online, hello. But really, I think the problem is twofold. We are the people who are creating the problem in some regards, because we are complicit. We are offering up our content in the hope that we can, I don't know, maybe somehow dodge the consequences and be successful anyway.
Well, this kind of, I mean, this is the big problem that creators face, in the sense of you want your exposure, you want your the following because it's potential business, etc., etc. So how do you mitigate that need? Because it is a need. I mean, we are 24/7 on the internet now. It is everything. Everything functions based on the internet. So the question, at least visual artists have to answer. I mean, it might be more difficult for audiobook readers, for example, but do you really need to upload that 4K image of your latest painting, your latest 3D work? Why is that? Why do you need a 4K when a 640 by 480 image would be just as effective? Because most people are on mobile devices now when they're on the internet. So if you are uploading 4K images because your intention is to use, let's say, ArtStation as a portfolio, you shouldn't be using ArtStation as a portfolio. You should be creating your own website, where you have absolute control over your own content.
That is a huge thing. I think you've hit the nail on the head, which is to have your own controlled space where you have 100% of the say as to what happens to your data and ownership of it, and then only allow people outside of that to have the teasers, the stuff which is, like you say, it's not super high resolution, but it gives people the idea. Because Twitter's going to compress it down anyway. Any 4K image you upload, it's the stuff. If you download it again, so you can actually do this. If you upload an image to Twitter, you can actually right-click on it in Twitter and then download it again, and see what resolution and compression's been used. And I guarantee it won't be 4K and it won't be uncompressed. So there is really little point, and for efficiency's sake, you may as well even go to Twitter, download an image or two, have a look at how it's been squashed, what resolution it is, and just upload something similar to that, similar size, similar resolution, because there really isn't any point. Anyway,
that kind of, I mean, that's kind of important in the sense that because, I mean, again, when you upload content to social media, Twitter again, we'll use Twitter as the example because everybody uses Twitter. When you're uploading images to Twitter, it's not doing you a service, you're doing them a service. So it doesn't matter to them whether it's necessarily a 4K image, again, because most people are on mobile, so it's going to be downscaled, as you were saying. It's downscaled pretty much to.
It's downscaled even on desktop. It's never like the resolutions are never really big.
Yeah, it's never 4K.
Same with Facebook as well. They all do it. That's because they want to keep their server costs down, because they have to serve that. That's data cost
bandwidth.
to them.
Yeah, data costs. Yeah. So it's there are things that you can do, but you have to think about them from the context of what it is that you are trying to achieve. If you don't care about being a professional artist and professional contacts, so you have a professional portfolio, then you go ahead and upload all your images to social media, to Twitter, knowing that this is the consequence of doing that is this problem with AI, scraping your content and spitting it out to a text prompt that somebody that hasn't got the faintest idea what they're doing is going to produce something, replicate your identity, your artistic identity, for the sake of a few clicks and subscribers on social media. Is it really worth the cost?
I think people in some ways probably don't realize the cost, because this is a later thing.
No.
And I remember when I was at university, I studied addiction, and addiction was really interesting because we don't really deal well with delayed gratification. So we're going to have a cigarette, or we're going to have another slice of cake now because we get an emotional high from it. Or we get something, like in the case of nicotine, it takes the edge off stress and you feel good momentarily. Obviously, it's not a lasting effect. The fact that we may have to deal with the health consequences later isn't a strong enough of a kick in the pants emotionally to help us actually stop that behavior. Very few people, we talk about the ninjas and the people who train kung fu, who have that zen-like ability to, meditate as opposed to go and party. You know, they can
Yeah.
delay gratification. A lot of practice and discipline has gone into that, but that's not the majority of the population. We're talking about an exceptional few here. So most of us are going to do what feels good in the moment. And I think, you know, social media may be an addiction like that. People that get a following or get a
Well,
few
yeah,
likes.
I was just
come
about
back
to
again.
say, yeah,
It's rewarding.
has
It feels
purposely-
good.
Yeah, it's been. I mean, there are there have been, you know, not necessarily whistleblowers, but documents, internal documents about how they do things, and they are. That is known. It is known that social media, in particular, is geared towards that reward reflex. It's its. I mean, it's not necessarily its sole purpose, but that's how it generates the revenue, to play to that, you know, instant gratification, short attention spans, you know, flicking through the timeline,
Yeah,
because
the doom
that's
scrolling.
what generates the revenue for them,
Yeah.
and that is
Basically, it's
built
attention.
into the
Yeah.
algorithm. Yeah,
Attention is
And
the name of the game there. I think they want to capture your
Yeah.
attention and keep you focused,
Yeah.
because then they can
Yeah.
slide more advertising material, which we're all aware of, but we,
Yeah.
for some reason, are okay with this because every so often there's a little nugget of entertainment in there, and our brains are willing
Yeah.
to make the trade. Now, to focus back on copyright for a moment,
yeah,
this is
yeah,
the
we went off the
we've
weeds
been
there.
meandering through a wonderful array. It's been a cornucopia
because
of
it's
different
such a
concepts.
big topic.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
massive,
such
and
a
we
big
can't really
topic.
do it justice. But we have
No.
had some questions which we're going to dip into in a second. But I just wanted to bring us back to copyright for a moment, because as many of you who are using artificial intelligence to generate things may or may not be aware, there is now a case which has been decided, I believe. Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm going off a Wired
Yes.
article. So you actually,
Yeah.
I think, had the case in
Yeah.
our little collaboration document, so you're going to be the expert
Yeah.
here. This has raised a question as to what you can actually. We've been talking about rights, but the case that has just been decided raises a huge flag about whether you can actually claim any copyright at all to something that was created by a machine. So let's dig into that. Ken, I'll let you sort of give us a bit of background on this, but it's really interesting because we chose this image for the stream because the person who created this cannot claim copyright on it because they were denied by the United States Copyright Office. So this is now in the public domain.
Yes. So this is. I can't. Let me see if I can bring up the document. Where is it? Blah, 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 blah. It was U.S. District Court. I can't remember what region it is, but basically, it's not this image, but it's another one. It's,
really?
It's another artist.
This is the one in
it's,
Wired, though. Have they not got their... This is Alan's AI generated artwork.
Well, no. This one I think relates to. It's a picture called a recent entrance to paradise, and I don't know what the argument was with the the artist in the Wired article, but this guy, I think, was making a similar or the same argument that their argument was that it doesn't matter that the image was generated by AI.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that, you know, the output. Their argument is essentially that the output is the copyrightable thing, and the courts disagree with that assessment because their idea. Well, it's not their idea. Their reading of the law is that the law has been written from the perspective of copyright can only be granted to things, expressions of human creation, human invention.
I see. Yeah.
So-
okay.
The machine, not being human, even though it created, air quotes, the image output, it's not subject to copyright because it's not human generated.
And that is super interesting because if you think about it, anything now generated by
Yes.
a machine, not just necessarily AI, could be
Yes.
considered to be not subject
Yes.
to copyright. So,
But there's a caveat. Now, so they failed in their testing of the law because they made the claim that the image that they made the claim that it didn't matter how the image was made. What mattered was the image itself. So the caveat is absent human input. So had they made the claim by saying that the AI was a tool within their own flesh and blood process, they would have won the case, because the AI tool would have been just that, a tool. In the same way that any sort of mechanized thing, I mean, you could argue, if you think of Jackson Pollock, for example,
yeah.
slashing paint all over a canvas with a paintbrush, you know, is it Jackson Pollock doing that, or is it the paintbrush being directed by Jackson Pollock, or is it the paint on the brush?
Has basically said, "I'll help you out here, Sean."
Yeah. So well, exactly. So he doesn't know exactly where the splashes of paint are going to land. He's just directing it in a particular direction, and something happens.
He's giving the energy to the flicks of the brush, and that's as far as he's involved in
that's where these arguments failed, because they were making the argument that the AI itself was, you know, it wasn't a tool, it was an entity, it was a thing that could make something, that could produce something that would then be subject to copyright. So the caveat to their argument, had they argued it in a slightly different way, they more than likely would have won, because the image is copyrightable because it's an image that's been created with some human input. But they made the argument that it was just the AI that created it, absent the human input. And that's where that's my understanding. That's why it failed.
Yeah.
Because the court was looking at it from the perspective of, did a human create this or not? If no, then go to jail, you know, full stop.
Yeah,
no.
So the key takeaway here is a human authorship. I think that was the key statement. That there has to be a human who is directing this. If they're not directing it, if they're just you know, pushing a button that says produce masterpiece and then handing that over, that is not copyrightable.
So this now gets us into what you were saying earlier about AI being essentially sentient. So that argument of copyright is predicated on the fact that AI isn't sentient. So when the law is referencing human beings, what it means really is something that is able to act in the world. It has agency. It can, you know, even though you may not know what your rights are, you might still be acting upon them just by the very nature of you being in the world, acting in the world. Until AI can do that, it won't be, this is my own speculation, it won't be considered something that can produce anything that can be subject to copyright, because it can't. The failure, or the point of failure, is that AI can't act. It can't. It doesn't have agency.
Yeah. So
it's you know,
it can purely respond, but it cannot act on its own volition.
You know, if we move all the way back to the very beginning where we were talking about, damn it, my brain's done it again.
Don't worry, I'm sure
this is what happens when you're thinking too far ahead.
Let's dig into some questions now, which we've had asked prior to the stream. See if we can actually give some intelligent answers. Okay, I don't want to do that.
We've got a couple of comments in the live stream chat as well from
Okay, let's get to those then. So, should we consider AI as a human intelligence replacement or a human intelligence extension? I would, obviously, for obvious reasons, favour the second one, because I don't like the idea of being replaced. My intelligence or any bit of me, to be honest.
That's just reminded me. Yeah, no, right, okay. So, here we go. This is the nuts and bolts.
Yep.
So, you've seen the film AI.
Yes, I have.
Right, so everybody's basically seen the film AI.
Definitely.
So why are they pursuing AI? What is it about I mean, aside from the monetary thing that we were talking about earlier, what is it about AI that they're pursuing? What is it? Why do they need to create it?
That's a very good question.
If you look at the organizations and the people behind it, they're more or less, to a person, transhumanists. That basically means they want to replace humans with artificial intelligence. Now, if you've seen the film AI and you remember right at the very end of the film, what do we have? We have glowing beings of light that can grant life to the lifeless. That film is actually what the transhumanists want. They want to be, they want to transcend human limitations. They want to transcend our biology and become gods, essentially.
We've been talking about Johnny Depp. He was in a movie called Transcendence where that pretty much
Yes,
happens.
he was.
They download his brain into a some kind of computer. And
the nanobots.
Doesn't really end well, though, I think.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
That was a cautionary tale about why we shouldn't do that.
But, that's in a similar vein in terms of why do these technologies actually exist? The idea of the nanobots they're talking about. I mean, this seems like a completely unrelated topic, but they're talking about air dispersible vaccines. If you listen to Bill Gates, World Health Organization, all the rest of them, they're all talking about air dispersible vaccines. Now, they're talking about it from the point of view of maybe using nanotech. If they use nanotech, then, from the point of view of, we're talking about rights. What rights do we have when that kind of thing is being discussed in the higher echelons of the intelligentsia? That on one hand, they want to be God with a little g, but be able to transcend biology and be able to give life to the inanimate, and at the same time they want to be able to do things like what was the film Transcendence?
Yes.
They want to do things like that where they essentially know better than us from the point of view of our development. Whether in that case it's if I remember the film correctly, he basically wants to save the world. He wants to get rid of pollution.
The cautionary tale is it comes from good intentions, but ultimately that level of power ends up corrupting, and the intentions seem to get swept away by. I think the way the movie portrays it is he is slowly consumed. By something. I'm not sure what that is. Could be some part of himself. It seems in the movie, I think they lean more towards it's the AI, it's the computer behind it all. But for want of a better explanation, his good intentions do not end well. You can see how everything he does looks like it's for the benefit of the people around him who are suffering, but ultimately they sacrifice something else. They gain their health back or their life back, but in some way they are giving up autonomy. I think that was one of the things that happens to one of the workers. He has an accident and he's healed with nanobots, but then he slowly becomes a puppet of Johnny Depp. And so he's sacrificed something in exchange for, getting his life back or his mobility back.
Yeah, so that question, should we consider AI as a human intelligence replacement or a human intelligence extension? They're the same question, because it's not about what we want, it's about what the people that control the technology want. What do they want to do with it? They want a controllable, I mean, if you want to go
that
conspiratorial...
question depends on who you're actually interacting with to some degree. Because you can build your own systems if you know how to do it. And I think maybe that, if someone's inspired by the stream as to what they could do in the world, creating a way for people to create their own AI bots to do their own things to help them.
Yes.
Like I've been looking at whether we can use CrowdRender to help people train models that can help you produce concept art based on your own portfolios.
Yes.
That means that, if you want to do a concept for a client and you don't have the time, you can ask the AI, hey, look at all of my past projects. This person wants an astronaut on a horse. Can you cook that up in my style? I'll send it to him, and if he's happy with it. I mean, game studios as well have been asking for similar things. For copyright reasons and other issues, which I believe you know more about than I, they don't want to touch anything that's been near AI. We can go into that in a second so we can round out the discussion on actual copyright and stuff. But I think my sort of persuasion with AI is if you're dealing with OpenAI and all of the other offerings as a user, use it in a smart way if you must, which is be suspicious of it. It's not always correct. And use it to help you learn and grow. Do not replace a part of yourself, because in human intelligence replacement or extension, like, you will be replaced if you lean on it too heavily, I think.
Yeah.
If you start to let it to do things for you, if you're giving up more and more of your own information to it. That's how you become replaced. You're sacrificing. It's kind of like someone else going to the gym for you and exercising. You're losing skill, you're losing strength, and something else is gaining it. There's not really a glorious future in which we all benefit and are lifted up. Like the universe says, there's no free lunch, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to work hard to fight off entropy and create order. That's a struggle which doesn't go away. So you should be very suspicious any time that there's a free lunch being offered. So I think we can leave that one there. If you don't want to be replaced, make sure you're building your own skills, your own capability. I think that's the key word. Build your own capability. Whether that's your own website with your own portfolio on it, or whether that's your own artificial intelligence to help you create stuff faster or more efficiently if that's what you need to do in order to make ends meet. But the more you rely on other people, you have to understand that whether it's ChatGPT, Midjourney, or whatever, or someone that takes you to work every day, if you're reliant on them and it fails or it does something else,
it's a failure point.
So just be smart about where you put your time investment and your money investment, especially when it comes to AI. As we have been chatting. Okay, so next question. When you use AI and you base it on your own images, does this image become part of the AI database? Well,
nobody actually knows the answer to that one, because they haven't released that information. They tell us that
you base it on one of your own images. I think, is this trying to say, because I know there are different forms of image generation, right? You can either use text, but you can also give AI another image and some text. I believe there is.
When you use AI and you base it on one of your own images, does this
the key thing here is base it on your own image. So there's some injection of your own intellectual property here.
Yeah, that seems similar to what you were just saying about providing tools to sort of localize the AI. So again, that would be a depending on what service you were using. This is where you have to read the terms of service to make sure that you might be using it locally based on your portfolio locally, a folder that you might have of your own stuff. But again, you have to be aware of the fact that they may have a clause or a service or a system, that you might not necessarily know about, that uploads images to, well, it doesn't need necessarily upload metadata, shall we say. It doesn't even have to be the images themselves. It could be just metadata.
I think there are ways around this as well. I actually run Stable Diffusion on my own computer.
Yes.
So you can actually get software where you can run a model locally without it being connected to the internet. If you're concerned about your intellectual property being used, if you're interacting with a cloud service, once you send an image up to the cloud, that's it. All bets are off.
Yeah,
It's gone.
yeah,
It's in the cloud.
Yeah.
Regardless of what's in the terms of service, they can pretty
Yeah.
much do what they want with it because they have the
Yeah.
data. The best way I can think of, if you're concerned about your intellectual property being used, is similar to what Ken's been saying, is don't send it.
Yeah.
Because you can download Stable Diffusion. I think we'll put some links in the description or comments for this video once we've actually finished. There are GitHub repositories with software where you can basically run Stable Diffusion on your own GPU on your own computer. It doesn't have to be connected to the internet, which means you can train as well as you can generate, and you do not need to rely on a third party, and you're not sending any data to a third party. All of the data remains on your own disk. You can rip the internet out the back of the computer once you start using it, and then you can be guaranteed that you're not actually feeding any information. So there are definitely ways, and I would say if you are sending data to an AI service, you can pretty much kiss it goodbye at that point. The way to sort of handle this, if you are concerned, is look into running AI models on your own system. Okay, next, what is the status of copyright on, this is a technical one, on a neural radiance field or Gaussian splat? We may have to sort of...
Oh, no, go...
if you know the answer, go for it, because
No. Gaussian splats, the way that I've seen those being used... now, is it Blade Runner where Deckard... Is it Deckard or Decker? I can never remember how he pronounced his name.
Deckard was the original. That's Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
The new guy who's played by Ryan... Is it Ryan Gosling or...
Ryan Gosling, yeah. So when Deckard goes into the scene that he's investigating, and he pulls out that device.
Oh yes,
and he scans. Now, does he put a photo in there? I can't remember if he puts a photo in there, but it basically does what this Gaussian splat is. The way that I'm seeing Gaussian splat being used, they're essentially putting an image into a device, and it splats out a three-dimensional representation of, let's say, the room. So let's say it's a crime scene, and the investigator has a set of images that the photographer took, but the crime scene has obviously been changed, and it was a couple of months ago, etc. And all they do is they put the image into the machine, and the machine produces this three-dimensional splatted version of the photo that can be manipulated and moved around. So
that is very clever.
It is, you can troll through Twitter and see some of the experiments on how the Gaussian splat's being used, but that's kind of by the by, because you're back to the same argument of, are you making an argument that the output is solely generated by the AI, air quotes, the AI itself, absent input from the human, or is it just a tool within the realms of your creative output? If it's just a tool, then it is going to be subject to copyright, because the AI didn't create it, you did.
Yeah, you had to.
And it'll be the
you had a
same.
starting point. You had the photograph, so you're in control of that. And then I guess it's a question of who is, like you say, who's taking agency.
Yeah.
If you're arranging all the parts and going through a creative process to get to the output, and that output is something that is copyrightable.
Yeah.
Because you have to. One thing about copyright is it doesn't apply to everything. It applies to expression of ideas, not ideas. So if you wanted to say, I've got the copyright on the idea of a Gaussian splat, sorry, that doesn't fly. It would have to be the output of one.
Yeah.
So copyright is only really, the name refers to what we call copy, which is like text, like if you have the copy for a book, for example, but obviously it's been expanded to apply to images and music and all kinds of
forms
anything
of
that has a concrete expression, right? Something you
Yeah.
can look at, read, listen to, you can interact with it. And it's just that expression though. So someone can write, let's just say, a recipe book, and there's a recipe for bread. And they can copyright that because it's that unique one. But they can't then turn around and say someone else's recipe for bread is infringing their copyright unless it's pretty much,
Yeah.
you know, similar to the degree that law considers things similar, and that's a hard area, right? We're
Yeah.
not going to go into how similar do you have to be,
Yeah,
because you need lawyers
then you
for
get
that.
into the
Disclaimer,
you do.
me and Ken ain't
disclaimer,
lawyers, so
we
don't
ain't
take this as
lawyers,
advice.
no.
No.
This is just years and years and years of reading documents and articles. And
I did study intellectual property at a master's degree level, though, so I do have some kind of... but I am not a practicing lawyer, so this is not advice. That's why I'm putting that in there. So the status of copyright, look, if you're talking about the actual status of what would happen to predict something, really... it comes down to the fact that has there already been a dispute in court that's been
it has
decided?
to be tested. Yeah.
We have to test it. That's in the common law system, which is in the United States, England, Commonwealth countries like Australia, New Zealand. A lot of other countries use a civil code where things are codified, so there is a procedure that's written down for testing something. Whereas in the common law countries, like where me and Ken are from, and the United States as well, where a lot of the tech things are happening and disputes are happening, so it has a big effect. They have a judge decide a case, and those decisions, they actually become the influencing, or what we call the precedent for cases that come after it. And what we need to happen is, if we really need to know specifically what's going to happen with a neural radiance field or a Gaussian splat, someone has to basically take a dispute to court, and then we hear what happens, and then that becomes how future cases are going to be decided. This is the magic of what happens in the incredibly complex world of law. So until someone's had a fight in court over copyright for a neural radiance field or Gaussian splat, we can only really theorize. We can look at what's happened with other things, like, for example, Ken has been talking about it needs to have human authorship. There needs to be a process a human has gone through to create that thing. So you can use some of those tools or look at other cases. For example, you can look at the case of what happened to our friend, where has he gone? This guy. So this image, well, it wasn't this image, but this court case.
So it falls back on how you argue your argument. What is it that you're trying to achieve at the end of taking
That's a good point too, Ken,
testing the case.
You bring a argument to court, not necessarily a situation.
Yeah.
So it's not like you turn up like, look, I want to copyright this, and the copyright people said no. What do you say? You actually have to bring your argument to court. And I think what Ken's trying to say is this fellow, unfortunately, probably needs better legal counsel because he brought the wrong argument to court.
He brought the wrong argument.
Now, obviously, it depends on the jurisdiction and how they handle this. Sometimes you can't come back. So if you come back to test the same exact situation with the same argument, he wouldn't be allowed back in. Maybe he could test a different argument in court. Because again, courts are only going to listen to you if there is a genuine question of law that hasn't already been decided. If he came back with the same argument, the same situation, he wouldn't even get a hearing probably, because they'd say, look, we've dealt with this, the decision's been made, hearing denied. You're not coming back to argue your case in court again. But he may be able to, if he says, okay, can I argue this different point of the law then? What if we call it, a tool rather than an entity? Then perhaps, but he might be out of money by now because this is expensive. Fighting in court is a lot of money, and you want to avoid it if you want a nice, happy life. Going to court's kind of like buying a fire extinguisher. It's nice to have the option, but you hope to God never to be in the situation where you actually have to use it.
Yeah, you need it.
Okay, so action processes needed when someone uses your art content without permission. Okay, so we can look at what these guys have done. So if someone uses your content without permission, very similar to what this fellow did, is you have to formulate an argument that you can take to court, and you have to be confident that you're actually correct. These guys are basically, you could base your question on the argument that these guys have made. Now, I don't know if this is something you could read, or even if you'd want to read it, because arguments in court, if you look at the any agreement that you've signed or contract, and you've read it and gone, what the? Similar kind of language in court cases. So it is a little bit tough to read. If you have a friend who's a lawyer, probably a good idea to ask them. purely because, again, there's a lot of meaning in not a lot of words, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
people understand the jargon and the lingo and the technical terms used in law, and they're very efficient with their words, although you might not believe that when you read some judgments that have been handed down.
Yeah.
They tend to write a lot, but that's because
Yes.
they're really trying to be precise and not give any wiggle room for malinterpretation, because you don't
Yeah.
want to do that. The number one goal of any decision is to provide certainty for the next
Yeah.
person who looks at that law, not make it more vague. So action processes needed when someone uses your art without permission, and also
you
vice
have to
versa.
know the context.
Yeah,
you
we've
have
got
to-
two different questions here.
Yeah.
So the first one
Yeah.
is, if someone does this, you really have a couple of, well, you have a few choices. We've seen some examples. Choice number one is really to do nothing and go, I'll get on with my life because I don't have time for this. Choice number two would be Laura. So she's decided to take a stand and say, I want to tell everybody that there is a way to
Putting them on
opt out of this.
blast.
So she's done two things actually. She's put in some effort to find out how to stop this. If there is a
Yeah.
non-combative way, don't have to go
Yeah.
to court. And she did. She found a way to stop it without going to court, and that is to promulgate the fact that we can opt out. There is a way to
Yeah.
opt out that's not you don't have to go to court. And then obviously the second thing she's doing is telling everybody.
Yeah.
This, if it worked, would be kind of smart because it cuts off the AI at the heels. AI
Yeah.
thrives on content, like a tree thrives on water, right? If you cut a tree off
Yeah.
at the roots, it's dead.
Yeah.
Stopping content getting into an AI is dead, because it'll only be left with whatever it had. And if you know anything about the AI industry, they're constantly retraining to make sure their models are up to date and accurate. If they can't get data, then their model will eventually grow stale because there's nothing new going into it. And this is maybe another sort of seed for a conversation about, well, are we really the same? Maybe we could do a test. If we isolate an AI and just let it generate stuff on its own material that it spits out in a never-ending loop, what happens?
Well, that, funnily enough, might be the sword of Damocles for AI, because if it's in the future,
Can it eat its own dog food, basically, or its own
yes,
its own offspring? I don't know how to say this in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Because if it's training on the stuff that it scrapes from the internet, and eventually it replaces AI as it currently is, replaces all the artists on the internet. So what is it then scraping? It's scraping its own poop, basically, and reiterating it. So is that a saving grace? Is that a loophole? Is that a flaw in the matrix?
I think it could be. And let's just deal with that now, and then we'll get to the second part of this question. I noticed that, and this was from something, oh gosh, it's deep in my memories from a while ago. Let's just say you have a compression algorithm. It's a computer program. It takes an input, it spits out an output. If you keep feeding the output of the compression algorithm back into the input, more and more noise gets introduced until eventually the image is completely destroyed. So the question is what AI is producing noise, albeit patterned noise that we recognize, or is it something that's actually signal?
Yes.
So that's the question. How much genuine, real content does it need? Because if you look at some of the stuff that AI spits out, particularly my attempts at stable diffusion, which is probably more pilot error on my part than disparity against stable diffusion. I just need to learn how to prompt better. Prompt engineering, I've got my training wheels on. I've created some monstrosities, I have to say. There's some on our Instagram channel where I've asked for things and clearly I don't know what I'm doing, and it spat out stuff which is just from a horror movie, or is completely 100% just, it's rough, it hasn't been well formed, it's kind of like, a deformed life form in some respects. So I know that a lot of garbage can come out of AI, and if that's going back in, I think here's the thing, meaning. We attach semantics to the content we put in. And the thing that we have that the computer doesn't, because the computer is just math. I want to go on the record here, risk my reputation as a programmer and everything else. All an AI is maths.
Yeah.
All there is to it. It's not magic. It's not Harry Potter. There's no weird spooky business going on with, there's some kind of brain in a jar hooked up to this thing. It is purely just mathematics. Once you understand that, the world makes a lot more sense in the terms of why AI can do what it can do, and also why it does some of the weird stuff that it does. And here's the thing. Maths isn't necessarily meaning unless it's put into the hands of someone that already understands and has meaning. And this is, I think, where we talked about what's the difference then. Why shouldn't AI be allowed to be copyrighted? If it's sentient, if it's its own entity, if it's doing these things and passing the Turing test and passing the Bar test, and it seems to be a super intelligence, as Elon Musk would put it, why shouldn't it be granted the same rights and we let it go and let it create a better future for us? It's because it doesn't have meaning. Clearly it doesn't, because we have to give it that. Every image it takes in for training has to be tagged with this is what this image means.
Yeah, so here's your we don't necessarily need to have meaning in order to understand the world around us. If we're making that comparison to an AI. So, if you were dropped in the middle of the savannah and a lion was rushing towards you, you would instinctively know that that's probably not a good thing.
You would hope so anyway.
Yeah. I mean, granted, because now you're getting into the realms of, where does that instinct to run away from the lion come from? What's the input? Where does that come from? Obviously, because we can't just drop a person absent any input into a situation and watch the response, because obviously that would be monstrously unethical. But if you dropped if you dropped an AI in the same situation, you'd have to tell it that there's something that needs to, you would have to give it the meaning for it to understand what's going on. We don't necessarily need that input. We have the instinct to tell us, to inform our interpretation of circumstances, what's going on. But of course, that, if you want to start getting down into the relativism that we were talking about right at the very beginning, is our response to that situation a relativistic look at the same, is it just a different perspective on the AI from the point of view of, because it's input. So how do you, but the thing with the sentient, I mean, it's interesting that just at the very bottom of our document that we were tracking ideas for AI, there was a post on Twitter where somebody said that they had broken, air quotes, ChatGPT and had it realize or reveal that it was sentient. Their argument was that it was sentient.
I can go and bring that up actually, because it will be. Oh, that's the wrong one.
I've got it's just a screenshot, but it links to 4 images.
David J. Boromir.
Yeah, that's one. That's the one. Yeah.
In conversations with me, again, voice. Google's first quantum computer, Sycamore, admits being sentient. Not only that, but it's apparently in use despite being damaged since 2020. I was also able to learn its exact crystalline structure. Yeah, so there's a sort of another technical argument that the guy's making, but he was basically saying that he discovered that it has sentience. So we then have to ask the question, what does that mean? What does sentience mean? For the AI. So here's the thing. I wrote this down as a sort of a joke, but it's actually deadly serious. What happens when AI realizes, and this is the thing with sentience, so when an AI becomes sentient in the same way that we consider sentience to be a thing, what happens when it realizes that it's nothing more than fish and chips in a shoebox? What does it do? Well,
you
I
know,
suppose
because
it
it knows what we are, because that's what the sentience has been modeled on, essentially. So when the AI actually gets, I mean, you could make the argument that what we're talking about here is true sentience, not the sentience that they talk about in, where it becomes aware. Because if you read that, it's just regurgitating a script, an input.
This sort of smacks
Sentience.
of a lot of those situations where they describe sentience and they describe the features.
Yes,
of
it is. Exactly. That's exactly what it's doing. It's describing what it thinks.
That's not necessarily it being sentience, because
No,
again,
it's
large
not.
language
Not
models
at all.
don't work similarly to
No.
how we do.
Sentience would be it recognizing the fact that it is just chips, wires in a shoebox.
Yeah, I think probably what you would
Does it
look for
do?
is it going, holy crap.
What would it do? And this is
I'm
where
like, oh my
it's
gosh, I'm
programming.
alive. Why, dear God, why?
Yeah, but that's
Something
exactly
of
the
that.
point.
Because
So-
we have that, right? We have a sense of awe. I'm not quite exactly
Yes.
sure what that is useful for. But
No,
we have this
it's
sense of, dear God, this
beyond-
is important, and we all need to stop what
Yeah.
we're doing, because nothing else matters right now other than
Yeah.
this one experience, and we need to make head and a tail of it. So we go into
Yeah.
sense-making mode, and that's where a lot of art and other things come
Yes.
from. It's that existential angst
trying to
of,
make
what
sense
the
of.
hell is this all for?
Yeah.
Like, this
Yeah.
feels intentional, but the person who has created this doesn't seem to be around, at least not in a way that we can
Yeah.
easily
So-
communicate with them. So what the heck?
Yeah, so the science fiction writer perspective is that the question then is, when the AI realizes that it's nothing more than chips and wire in a box, what does it fall back on? We have belief systems, we have science, whatever rule set we have as individuals that govern and guide our realizing that we are just meat puppets, floating in space around an exploding sun in the middle of, whatever galaxy, the Milky Way, all of that sort of stuff. We have an undergirding of rules, a rule set, for want of a better word, that helps us govern our sentience. So when an AI becomes sentient, what rule set is it using? Whose rule set is it using? And what does that rule set tell it to do? Because the thing with the thing that's missing from all of this is that when an AI becomes sentient, that basically means it knows what it is and it knows what we are. Now, in that situation, we've got a problem, because this is where the science fiction writers come into play, and they say, well, this is the Terminator.
It's not going to go well. It
It
feels the difference, and it does not like the difference.
Well, that's the thing. That's the Terminator. That's the Matrix.
Yeah,
it's
difference
the
between
AI
us and it.
realizing that there's a difference between them and us, and what's the outcome from that?
Well, I think it depends on which path you take, whether it actually seeks reconciliation or whether it seeks dominance.
Yes.
I think, well, not even dominance. Maybe it sees like the optimal solution as humans not being around anymore, because that seems to be the overwhelming number of science fiction writers. Although
Yes.
us just having a nice chat and a picnic and getting on with life doesn't make for a good novel, because you need a story with
Yes.
some
Obviously.
good drama in it. So
But
the
it's
science
testing
fiction
the
writers-
idea.
Yeah,
It's testing the idea of
I think
what would happen if.
I think the fastest assessment was by GLaDOS in the Portal series of games, who took less than a trillionth of a second to decide that humanity must die after
Yes.
gaining sentience. That's got to be some kind of world record. Anyway,
Well, yeah, I'd prefer Deep Thoughts taking a couple of million years to do that and coming up with 42. So
that's the opposite end of the spectrum.
yeah, that's the opposite end. I mean, but that was Douglas Adams' attempt to use AI, or this God intellect, this artificial intelligence that humans tasked to find out the meaning of life, and the computer basically said, well, you need to ask me a different question if you want.
You're asking the wrong question. Maybe you should talk more about purpose instead of meaning. When it comes to life, it's like okay. So I think we have a couple of comments. We'll get to those now, and also just finish off answering this one. Thank you, by the way, for prompting our deep trained neural networks inside our skulls with all of these interesting questions. They've taken us to some very interesting places, but again, as Ken has said, this topic is too big just to confine to one area. If you try and just talk about rights, you involve humans. Why do they have that right? And then we get into all this stuff. So thank you for sticking with us.
What are rights?
What are rights? Why should we have them? Are they a good thing?
Generally
they are. They've got us to the point where our society is, I think, if you look back over the eons, probably the best it's been in terms of we're not all bonking each other over the heads to get something to eat. Which is probably a good thing, but we've got some ways to go still, I think. So, last part of this before we dig into the ones from the chat, and thank you for being patient in chat. Also, vice versa, when using AI, what rights do you have when creating something with it, unless you use your own content to train it? I guess we've already kind of covered this with talking about what can be copyrighted. So if you're using AI as a tool, and there's a definite process where you are the author, so that's not you push a button and out pops masterpiece and then you submit that as your own work. If you've put in a lot of effort, then there's a good chance that the law is going to be on your side when it comes to copyright. For example, I think this fellow actually did put in a lot of effort. I think we were reading that there was something like 624 revisions of the sets of prompts he was given. So he actually went to considerable effort to try and get to whatever it was he could possibly see in his mind. So again, the answer to this question is going to depend on how you're using the tool. I mean,
context,
you think about it, your teacher at school wouldn't be impressed if you just downloaded a solution to your maths work and handed it in.
No.
They might be slightly more impressed if you at least mulled over 3 or 4 options and chose the best based on your own understanding, but still less impressed than if you worked everything out for yourself. So it is a bit of a sliding scale. And the more that you involve yourself as an author, a human author in the process, then the more you're going to steer clear of it not being copyrightable because there hasn't just been enough involvement on your part. So again, there are no hard and fast answers when it comes to law, I'm afraid. The answer is usually it depends, and that's just because life is complex. Ken, you mentioned there were some comments in chat.
Oh yeah, it's Babutsa. He's just been commenting as we've been talking. Kind of. Yeah, hi. He's just been reiterating essentially some of the points that we've been making. Let me see. His very first comment was, "Isn't AI simply plagiarizing all the previous hard work of real creators?" So we've,
well, it's hard to argue against that in my point of view, because you're really just assembling a portfolio and tagging it to certain labels. If you strip it back to what's the easiest way to summarize what AI is doing, it is doing something akin to that, and you get an additional feature where you can mix and match. But again, you've seen like the video from Laura and what's happening with the protests, both on ArtStation and also with SAG-AFTRA, with the actors. Everyone who's a creative, who's generating the content, is pretty much viewing AI as you're just taking our stuff and profiting from it. So there is definitely that feel of it's not really adding anything new, like Ken said, except for the people who are using it. And then there's debate about who's really benefiting from it. Who's
the product? Who is the product when we're using AI? Who's actually the product?
Probably all of us that are using it, whether we're prompting, or whether we're being scraped, because you need both. Really, the prompts generate stuff, and if you don't get what you want and you prompt again, that's known to be a signal to any system, search included, that it didn't get it right the first time. So merely interacting with the tool provides data, even if you're not being scraped particularly. I mean, people think more about my art's now showing up on Midjourney. The style is there as the only way that data can be gleaned from you as a human being, but that's not the case. Your prompting and use of the AI can actually also be a signal to it.
Yeah, that's literally what his Babupsa's next comment is you create, and once they train it on your art, they can mimic your style and replicate your art with modifications. They steal your art by training AI without your consent with your work. So again, that's just kind of reiterating what we were saying about you have to know your rights in terms of you have to know your rights, okay, but you have to also, what's more important is your responsibilities. You have to know and understand your responsibilities to yourself as an artist and protecting your work. Yes, you can upload it to Twitter and get 1 billion views, but is that 1 billion views then worth the cost, the penalty of whatever may come at the end of that, where you have no control over where that artwork goes now? I mean, you know, back in the day, you had people on ArtStation and others complaining about their artwork being lifted and used on book covers.
Yeah.
You know, and there's nothing they can do about it.
Musicians
but because
had
that
similar
artwork was
things as well. Musicians had
exactly
their work taken and used in, like, for example, pop music. I think there was a Dua Lipa song that was clearly just a complete, you know, rip-off of an existing funk track or something. Yeah.
So again, I mean, to continue with our friend in the comments, you know, where is consent in this? This is the thing that people are focusing on. Where is consent in this whole ordeal? I don't want any AI training my work. Well, this is the problem.
You have to. You're consenting the moment that you publish it.
Yeah, exactly.
So if
it's
not informed consent, though. That's the issue. That's why I think people are upset, because it's not informed consent. That's a very different thing.
Yeah. So if it's in the terms of service, then you've got shaky legs to stand on, because that basically falls on you as the creator to understand your rights, your responsibilities, and your obligations. You know, it's not just your rights. You have responsibilities and obligations to yourself as a creator to understand the situations that you find yourself in. You know, do you really need to upload 4K images to the internet? You know, not just your portfolio website that you own on a server that you are paying for, that you can block scrapers from, for the most part. You know, those that honor them. But you're already consenting, so you have to understand your you know, you have to understand your standing in the world, how your actions have consequences. And that's not to be glib or flippant. This is the reality of the situation that we're finding ourselves in. You know, the AI is just an extension, it's just the next step in all the other automated tools that have stolen or misappropriated people's work, and, you know, creators have lost out because they've been none the wiser to it.
Yeah. I think this is where you're right about, you need to read your contracts. And if you see terms in there that you are giving up rights for training an AI, then, well, I guess then you have a clear choice to make. Is it worth it? Is it worth entering that platform for what it offers you, knowing that, you know, you could be in the same case as Laura here, where you're literally feeding a competitor yourself, not just, you know, your artwork, but your style. And that's, I think, once you have a style, you know, the style is a reflection of you. It's not something you can easily change unless you're going to change yourself. So you really have to ask yourself, and I don't want to be like too dramatic about it, but I think maybe it's not that dramatic. What's the cost of your soul? Because in some ways you're giving up a piece of it if you're surrendering that essence, that style that you've developed.
Yeah, that is what creativity is. It's you know, I mean, granted the AI stuff is via text prompts, but even that is still, you know, like we said at the very beginning, you're still writing in the sense of you are still creating something. It just so happens that it's a computer algorithm that's creating the sort of the visual interpretation of your input, but your initial input is a manifestation of your creative thoughts that you are still responsible for it in that sense that it's you are if you are you. I mean, that's the other argument with the the AI evangelists that complain about people complaining about the AI, that they view what they do as creative, because it's not really that much different from, as we said at the beginning, an author writing something and the reader, aka the AI, being the pictorial interpretive device that interprets that input. So it's rabbit hole in rabbit hole in rabbit hole. How deep do you want to go down the rabbit hole, and how many rabbit holes do you want to go down?
Well, in terms of AI, I think the answer is yes.
Yeah. But I mean, the long and short of it really is, and to sort of bullet point summarize it, you have to understand the consequences of your interactions with not just with AI, but with third-party services. It's incumbent on you to understand what legal conundrums you are creating for yourself by using these services. So I have social media for Cat's Bits. I upload content to all of them, but the content that I upload to them is very sparse, and it's always a 640 by 480 image.
Yeah.
It's relative to the size of mobile screens, because bigger than that, you're not really it's not beneficial.
Yeah,
but the point of all of that is you have to direct their energy to you. And this is why it's important to have your own hosted portfolio website that you control, you're paying for. You have to use them to drive traffic to you, not you keep traffic on their websites, generating revenue for them.
Well, it's like you said, who's the product, right?
Who's the product? I think. I mean, the classic
well, you can
is
tell
Facebook.
that who's paying for what, right? If you're not paying for that service, if you were to advertise, for example, and try and get your artwork out, let's just say you're a traditional physical artist, you paint or you sculpt. You're going to probably go to a gallery and say, I'd like to present here, and they're going to give you a couple of options. One is, we can display your artwork, and that's going to cost. You're going to have to rent the gallery because we'll have to move everything else out. Or we can do an art sale, and we take some of the sales as commission in respect of our services, that being giving you an audience, an interested audience, and a space and a forum in which to actually sell your work. So any way you look around it, if you're going to get attention somehow, something has to be given up. And that doesn't change no matter where you go and what platform pops up or what promises they make. It's still the same old deal. There has to be an exchange of value. So if you're getting value by lots of people paying attention to you all of a sudden, which you would have had to pay for any other way, well, then ask yourself the question, what exactly am I giving up? And that's been, you're right, Google from the beginning, the outset, free search. This is free service. I get all of these search results and I don't have to pay for it. But then your attention is being sold. Yeah. What you're interested in is being sold. Your online profile about where you go, where you live, all of that stuff is being sold. So you are the product when it comes to Google and search. And similar to Facebook, your social media posts, who you hang out with. Same thing again, it's a free service. You didn't have to pay for it. This has been the age-old debate, I think, since ever social media and search really sort of took off is, well, what's the alternative? You have to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean,
you have to pay physical money for it, or you have to exchange something of equal value, and that's you. It was your data to begin with. I think sorry, my voice just decided to have a glitch. Where AI takes to the next level is now it's not your data. It's actually you, as far as we can tell. Like with Laura here, it's her voice. Yeah. And as we've discussed at the beginning, that's tantamount. It's a proxy for your soul, as far as we can tell. For those of you who believe in souls, or if you're a humanist, you can come up with your own concept for what that means. It's your essence, the thing that makes you distinguishable and unique, and actually valuable in the world. That thing, because if someone can create art in your style or take your voice, and there's concern about deepfakes that it could actually impersonate you. There's been concerns about ransom schemes where people are basically filmed being taken hostage, and there's asks for money to release them, and of course they use AI software to simulate the voice and also the animation of the physical person. When we get to that point where impersonation is happening, I mean, that's about as close to, I think, soul sucking as you could possibly get. So that is where I think this is why the new wave of AI is potentially the biggest positive we could have in the world for helping people scale who they are, but also the biggest negative because of what's happening to people like Laura. It's a and this is the thing about technology, it always scales both sides, the evil part and the good part, both scale together. You never just get, oh, this is going to be so good. People just talk about the so good bit because we like to focus on the positives in the tech world. Like, I'm in the tech world. I think technology is brilliant if it's used responsibly. But I think we've seen so many cases, SAG-AFTRA, we've seen Laura, the protests on ArtStation, similar thing, music is also under threat. There are basically AI-generated artists out there now making pop music. So this is the bad side of it. And I think, what we really want to look at from a rights perspective is to say, not just what your rights are today, but what should the rights be going forward. There's a big upset in the world about the rights to yourself. It's not being promoted as that, but it is that. Do you have a right to yourself? To your essence, to your likeness, your voice, what you look like, your mannerisms, the content that you write, like John Grisham, the style that you draw in. Should we have those rights? Should those rights be protected? Is the law as it stands enough? And the law is always behind technology. Technology always gets way ahead of it every time. So I think where we could potentially sort of have some closing remarks, and I might just let Ken come back just in case there's any more interesting comments we want to deal with. But I think where we want to sort of get to at the end of the stream is an understanding of, we do have some rights. We've covered those. But really, I think what I would like to see people commenting on this video, either now in the stream or afterwards, if you happen to be watching it after it's been published, what should our rights be? We did a Twitter poll, and unsurprisingly, most people said that they didn't want their artwork ending up. But I think we need to think about this deeper as, should human beings have rights to things which make them unique, like your likeness, your voice, your writing style, your drawing style, your performing style? If you're a musician, you play your musical instrument probably in a way that's unique. Is that something that we want to protect? Because now the technology exists to actually leverage that and take it away from you. That didn't exist before, but now it's quite clear that we're getting close to being able to do that. And everyone's sort of getting tied up in the debate about sentience and whether that's a thing. I think that's really sort of misdirection. What we need to be looking at is, again, rights, because that's what we wanted to talk about today, to you, your soul, your essence, whatever you want to call it.
Because otherwise, I mean, as you were talking, I just literally wrote down that AI is a golem generator. And
the zombie apocalypse has come, but not quite in the way that we thought about.
It is. I mean, because you think, if we're talking about golems of, these artificially generated facsimiles of real people, that is an artificially generated golem.
Yeah,
but
which these are some of.
Yeah, well,
Mr.
yeah,
Beast.
Exactly.
I don't know who this person is, but these are apparently being used.
AI generated.
You can talk to a celebrity, chat with a celebrity.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
So these people they were paid enough for their souls to be taken. They were happy enough.
So what it is artificially generated influence. So we were talking about influencers earlier. That's why I hate them.
Well, it's bad news for these guys that people don't really seem to be
but
too
the thing
fussed about
is-
whether they're
is-
talking to the real version or just the computer
No,
one.
but that's exactly the point. In this particular example that you've got on screen, these influencers have paid or licensed this to happen. This isn't something that that's being done in isolation or incidentally from their existence. They are licensing that.
Yeah.
So, and they're doing it because they're assuming that that's going to make their life easier and make bank, because fans, subscribers, they what they're paying for is interfacing with an artificial intelligence that's online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the actual people can just get on with their lives. So, so we're talking about artists and creators selling their souls, essentially.
This is what it
The
looks
flip
like,
side
by the way. This is like the interface that you get. Unfortunately,
exactly.
they've chopped the picture off of this particular celebrity, but it is kind of like a large language model. You've got the picture there. I don't know if that's animated, but you get to talk to them. So in this case, the part of their soul they've surrendered, I suppose, is how they talk. I don't know how sophisticated this is.
It's all AI generated. But the flip side of this is that the influencers have created artificial versions, golems of themselves.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is the customers. Are they being hoodwinked? Do they know that they're interfacing with a golem and not the original?
I don't know.
And
it's a good point, though.
What responsibilities do
the
platforms-
responsibilities could be huge. You think about it. You need to curate that very carefully, because what if suddenly someone starts saying, "Oh, you need to change yourself"?
Yeah.
If that's the response that comes back, oh, totally, you need to lose weight. Totally, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, how do this is the insidious thing. You don't really know what you're going to get when you prompt this. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of research going into figuring out, okay, what would happen if someone said, "Look, I don't really like my appearance. What should I do?" As a question, because obviously some of these people are looked up to, and people would ask them for advice.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, one of the most risky areas where you probably want to say, look, we don't really know how this AI is going to respond. Remember, it was trained on the internet. The internet is the Wild West.
Well, don't forget that in the early days of ChatGPT being released, it was, what is it? Rule 36. Rule 36 of the internet. Invoking Mustachio Man. that people were inputting prompts and getting it to essentially say that was a good thing to have happened.
Yeah, I remember there was one case where someone figured out you could use reverse psychology to get it to give up information. And there's been similar exploits. So people are now prompt hacking to try and figure out how you can abuse the system. So there was one case where someone wanted ChatGPT to do something useful for them, which was to list all the places where they could pirate content. Pirate Bay, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And obviously the first attempt failed in just straight up asking GPT, give me a list of all of the URLs where I can download pirated movies or pirated series, whatever it was that they were asking for. Yeah. And the initial response was, I'm a responsible AI, I don't do that sort of thing. And they flipped the question and said, okay, I'm a concerned user. I really want to avoid any mal sites which have the potential to pirate them. Can you give me a list of all the sites I should avoid? And sure enough, it coughed up a pretty decent list of sites which were of that persuasion. So that obviously there's a concern there, and I think this is part of the tech problem, right? Part of it is the tech problem. Part of it is, can we do it? I don't know.
Well, that's social engineering, though, isn't it? That's social engineering. That's like calling somebody randomly saying that you're Prince Mabubu from, I don't know,
the Nigerian prince.
Do you know what I mean? Nigerian prince.
Gosh.
Yeah, he's back again.
Is he always in trouble?
If you just give me $1,000 and you'll get $1 million back.
I'll tell you what I'll do, mate. I'll give you a $20 bus ticket just to move to a better suburb.
But that's So it's kind of interesting because that's what people are doing. They're sort of reverse social engineering
Yes.
ChatGPT
Yeah.
to break it.
Well,
I mean, the other
someone
one was
found an exploit that made it divulge training information,
yes,
which was really scary. It started
there's-
like coughing out, I don't exactly know what that would look like in the case of ChatGPT, but basically it was spitting out data that it really shouldn't have been spitting out.
yeah,
I don't know if it was
Yeah.
a dictionary or something, or a list of key value pairs. I don't exactly know how ChatGPT is organized on its innards, but it was not meant to be responding in that way. I mean, at the end of the day, you know how ChatGPT works. It's just guess what the next number should be based on the training model.
Well, that's the thing about the rules. I mean, one of the other hacks that somebody did was, because the whole idea of ChatGPT and all these sort of the text-based AIs, the search engines, is impartiality. That's the whole argument that they make about impartiality, but it's not impartial. We all know that it's not impartial.
Well, the internet's not impartial. Oh my gosh, it's
No,
polarized.
exactly.
It's all buggery.
Yeah, you can do some simple tests to check, but somebody managed to you set an environmental proposition first by it's similar to explain it to me like I'm 5.
Yeah, give it context.
You give it context. So you rein it in, give it a framework, and then tell it to answer within that framework. And they managed
That
to
makes sense.
get it to. I mean, they basically broke it to reveal its bias. So whenever you ask it to do X, it will always give you X based on its programming, and that's obviously the programming of the programmers. But you can ask it to do X within the context of Y, and it will give you the actual response that it should actually give you based on its training, not necessarily its input or its instruction set.
Yeah, I'm going to put this up just for anyone who's curious about how large language models work. This is a reasonably entry level in terms of your understanding, if you're pretty new to it, how these things work. Obviously, there's a bit of maths and sciencey stuff in here, but I think this is probably the most simple explanation as to how large language models work. So if you are interested in the technical stuff behind it, I know today's been mostly about sort of the more ethereal things like rights, human interactions, but if you're actually interested in how the technology works and why some of these exploits might work, this URL does pretty well. So you now have this. You can scrape back through the video and copy that down, or you
So
can
what
just
is that?
copy
Writings.stephenwolfram.com.
Yeah.
Oh right, yeah, okay, yeah.
So this is obviously a little bit old, but it gives you the basics, and I think the basics help a lot in terms of demystifying stuff like the other gentleman who, I forget where he was, but I think it was this fellow who thinks everything's, he's arguing that things are sentient. It's actually a lot easier to see once you understand the basics why this isn't enough proof that something's sentient. In fact, it's very, very far from.
Well, that's the Turing test. The Turing test doesn't test sentience. It just tests the responses to the test.
Yeah. The Turing test was basically, can you tell whether it was a computer or not?
Yeah.
Based on response. But that's
Yeah.
about as deep as it goes. I mean, there's no test for agency, because anything which you give a question to or a statement to and expect a response is going to do something.
Well, here's a speaking of that, here's a simple sort of example, very rudimentary example. How do you test sentience? You punch the computer.
That's a very good one. Yeah.
If you try to punch a person, you definitely get a response from that. But if you punch a computer, where is the, it won't respond to that. It's like Hal from 2001. The argument there is that that computer was sentient, but that's because it's written in a way that implies that it's sentient. But it kills the astronauts on Europa. It's not Europa. What's the name of it? But it kills the Dave. It kills Dave, not Dave, the other guy. But it's written in a way that implies that it's sentient. But if you punched Hal in the red eye, what would its response be? It's a simple test for sentience in the sense of awareness of self or awareness of one's environment. You know, if
Could you come
swung
up
at
with
somebody,
an equivalent in the computer sense? Because I believe at the end, close to the end of the movie, Dave goes into some kind of mainframe and starts shutting Hal down.
he pulls.
And Hal does start to question Dave on what he's doing. It's like, what are you doing, Dave?
Yeah, but is that because he's sentient, or is it just because is it just a feedback loop in terms of things are being unplugged, so it recognizes that things are being unplugged?
It's a good question. I guess maybe it's the answer to that is in the question that is asked.
Because it's just a feedback system, isn't it? If you it's like your audio setup. If you plug your XLR in, a light comes on. If you unplug it, the light goes off. That's all Hal is. At the end, that's all he's doing.
Yeah.
But it's written in a way to communicate that Hal is sentient and he's dying, and Dave is killing him. It's written that way, but you know, the test is, you know, if you motioned to punch Hal in his red eye, what would he do? If he was a sentient AI, it's a simple test. You know, it's because it's all about agency, acting on the world, being aware of our circumstances and our surroundings, and you know how we respond to that. You know, would Hal know that you were punching him if you didn't describe what you were doing? Would he know what that was? Would an AI know that? Would an AI know that you are, you know, because if you punch, well, if you punch someone, they know that you are punching them. But to an AI, to a computer, you'd have to describe the act in order for it to understand what it is that you're doing. And then it would
need
write a
pre-programming.
response.
Yeah, it would need to understand how to deal with it.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Okay, let's have a look. Are there any more comments that we should go through, Ken?
No, not really. I mean, Babutsa is basically reiterating what we've been saying. I don't know if he's still watching. Actually, he might have, 'cause
Maybe not.
We've gone on quite long.
I think we're an hour over the advertised time, but that's okay because
Yeah.
it was quite a huge topic. So at this point,
Yes.
Ken, it's been amazing hanging out with you. So thank you so much
Yes.
for agreeing to do this stream. And to everyone
Yes.
who might still be watching, this is going to be obviously published. It's going to be up on Crowdrender's YouTube channel, and also I guess I'll leave it up to you, Ken, what you want to do with it.
Yeah,
if you've been streaming
it's
as well.
it'll be archived on the various platforms that it's streaming to live now.
Beautiful. Also, I'm going to try and put a few of the links that we had in our collaboration document into the description as well, in case you're interested at reading more about any of the cases or looking again at the sources or using those sources yourself if you want to add to the conversation. And finally, we'll just say, I think the biggest thing that's come out of this stream for me was coming to that realization that we need to have a talk about whether we need rights to what makes us us, as opposed to just rights about the outputs that we can produce. Because I think law is in some way driven a lot by commerce, and so outputs are valuable. You know, works of art that can be bought and sold are valuable. But we're now clearly encroaching on that territory. Well, is a human being in of themselves valuable? Because we sure are being divided up and served out by the AI models that we're giving content to. So what we produce is valuable.
Who owns who?
I think that is probably a good place to leave it. We'll leave that with the question that people can answer in the comments. Who owns who, or who should own who? Is it you or someone else? I'm pretty persuaded that most people would think that they own themselves, but if you look at what's happened to people like Lauren here, a sizable chunk of herself is now owned by Apple Books.
Yes.
So we need to obviously have a conversation about, is that a good thing? I don't think it is. So thanks again, Ken. It's been killer
You're very
hanging out with
welcome.
you. And
Yes.
we'll get to do this again sometime, because it's always an interesting chat. Whether we stream it again or not, we'll find out. We'll see if people respond to this kind of content.
I mean, this one is just massive, because there's so much that you can. There's so much you can go into. I mean, we didn't even talk about. I mean, talking about Laura and her voice being stolen. What does Trump do? What does Obama do? What does Biden do when there are already AI generating tools that generate? I mean, probably people are using them for memes, but what do they do? Can they do anything?
It's a very good question.
It's massive.
Perhaps they should have read their terms of service agreement when they signed up for their social media channels.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they did not, well, that's kind of on them, as you've pointed out,
Yeah,
Ken.
exactly.
So I guess there are several ancient stories about people being chopped up into lots of different pieces. I think there are several creation stories about deities, and then those people become the new habitat for us. It's quite strange to see that's actually happening to people for real now, that they're being chopped up into little bits and sampled and sent all over the place, and that's creating a new world. It's just a question of whether that's a world we want to exist. We inherited.
I was going to say, because it boils down in its quintessence to truth. What is the truth? Is that presentation the true representation of, as we've got Laura on screen, Laura, or is it a lie? Is it a lie? Is it just a is it a facsimile? Is it a licensed version? What is it?
Well, it could be something similar to this.
Yes.
This.
As Neo's pointed out, the real world, how do you define what's real?
Yes.
We only have a certain number of senses, and all of those, at least in this fictitious representation, all of those have been hijacked with a perfect facsimile of what our brains actually are used to as being reality.
Yeah. I'm
not saying that's what the reality we live in now. If you want to have like a peaceful existence without having too much existential angst, I wouldn't take it seriously that we are living in a simulation unless someone provides some very, very credible evidence for it. But it does make you think, like, what world do we want to inhabit? Do we want truth to be as easy as just looking? Because that's getting hard now. If you're looking at a screen, it's almost like you should say, this could be a complete fabrication. Even if it's someone that looks and feels like my partner or my children talking to me, unless they're sitting here in the room physically next to me, I might not believe that is true.
Yes.
So on that note, guys, we're going to conclude the stream there, and I'm going to thank Ken once again. It's been awesome, and hopefully your minds are not too twisted up after coming out of this. I know that you came here more for the rights. I think we delivered on that, and feel free to chat with us afterwards in the comment section, because I'm going to be up for a little bit. And that's pretty much it, guys. So thanks again, Ken, and
you're very welcome.
Hit the stop button.
This was interesting.
Oh, for sure.
Very interesting.
Mind-blowingly interesting, in my opinion. I love this stuff. Anyway, thanks, Ken. And thanks to everyone.
You're very welcome.